Okay, great. Thank you for your patience as we try to get all of our panelists onto the South Africa session. So we've got Tony from Green Building Council Mauritius, so you can have your camera on, and we've got Ntobisi Masinga from the Green Building Council South Africa. So it'd be great to have your camera on. I know that in our attendees, we also have some of our councils who are looking to apply for membership. So we've got Botswana. So we see you, Tebi. Nice to have you there. And we also have a few from, I see Zambia, some of the people there. So it's great to have you all be part of this session. Tony, I think you were part of the session before you were watching with East Africa. Any thoughts from your side on some of the challenges that they were talking about in East Africa that you think might be relevant for Southern Africa? It was quite interesting to hear that dynamic. And obviously after this, we'll go off to West and Central Africa before we really start the session.
Yeah, I think, hi everyone, this is Vicente. Hi everyone, thanks for having me here. It was very interesting to hear from different panelists about what's happening in the countries, also different insights, also some shaking a little bit also in terms of our belief of sort of changing the world building by building. I think that was also quite clear that we need to look beyond building also. But it's very similar, I must say, very, very similar situation. We talked a lot also about NDCs. I think that's sort of a guiding document, but I believe, put it that way, for net zero and for decarbonizing the built environment. Yeah. Similarly, I see that also in Rwanda, they talk mainly about green buildings and energy efficiency and not so much about net zero. Similar for us, but I'll share about that a bit later. Thanks very much.
Yeah, no, it's quite interesting. And I love how we're kind of going across the different regions to get a sense of that. So for this session, we'll speak a little bit more just around what net zero is looking like in Southern Africa. And I think maybe what we'll do is very similar to the last one. And I do have a bit of a presentation, but we'll probably do that a bit later, if at all, because I'd really love us to just really talk about some of the net zero solutions that are happening across our continent and really deep dive a little bit more. And I love, you know, the countries that we have represented on this panel, because we've got Mauritius, which is a small island developing state. And then we've got South Africa, which is the highest contributor when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions on the continent. So when we are doing what we're doing here, I'm also based in South Africa, but what we're doing this side, you know, it's really impacting some of our countries on our own continent as the most vulnerable continent to climate change. So, so I think what we'll do is we'll do a quick round of introductions and we'll do a little bit of a deep dive into some of these topics. So let's start with you, Tony. I know you've kind of spoken a bit, but if you can introduce yourself and then we'll go over to you, Ntobisi.
Yeah, so I'm Tony Leonlan. I'm the founding, co-founding director of Green Building Council of Mauritius. We exist since 2009, 2010. So it's a good decade already. And for my day job, I'm a sustainability consultant and social impact strategist, working for different organizations, including governments, etc. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And obviously, I know your video has disappeared, but if you want to introduce yourself so that we can get right into the question.
Yeah, good evening from this side of the world. Sorry about that. I quickly had to run and plug my laptop before it dies on me. My name is Ntobisi Masinga. Yes.
Coal-fired power.
You know what? Multitasking, working from home. My name is Ntobisi Masinga from the Green Building Council, South Africa, and I manage sustainability, city resilience, and the larger stakeholder business relations. I work largely with governments across Africa, of course, South Africa too, sometimes parts of Europe, and of course with the private sector too. So my large focus is in that sustainability and climate change ambit. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks very much. And it's great to have both of you on this panel, which will specifically focus on Southern Africa for this panel. And I know we're not representing all the countries within the region. We do have other GBCs, so Namibia. We also do have, we have a few that are also coming up. But I think let's maybe start with you, Tony, in terms of net zero. Why would you say, is there net zero happening in Mauritius quite a lot? And what would you say was the motivation to get net zero to that point in Mauritius?
Net zero, it's something that's been, we talk of a town, a lot about the net zero transition in the last probably year or two. I think our neighbor country, Reunion Island, is a little bit more advanced regarding net zero building or net Z building and net positive buildings. So in Mauritius, I think we're a bit lagging behind. I'm not sure why this is the case, really. Probably because the way we build, it's very conventional, and we use we don't use insulation, we use like concrete blocks, etc. Whereas in Reunion Island, they have dry construction techniques, we use wood, they do a lot of natural ventilation strategies. And in Mauritius, I think we tend to keep on to the mechanical ventilation. And this is, I think net zero is obviously energy reduction, but also about energy production. So this is coupled obviously with the grid, and there are different schemes also that you can use. But some of these schemes have now changed, but they are not so attractive to do. And then also they're not open anymore for people to apply to be having the PV and to connect to the grid, etc. So you become in batches. So there are some practical issues, but not to say that there's no move towards net zero. Currently, there's the aspiration of the public sector leading the way. So I'm working actually on a project with government, and we want to start like greening some of the public buildings, starting from the State House of the President. Yeah.
Okay, and that's awesome. It's quite interesting when you say public sector leading the way. How would you say that happened? Would you say that they saw it as a priority because of NDCs, or how did you get that where public sector is actually leading the way and government is leading the way to net zero? Because I seem to be it's a little different. So how did you get there?
So I think it's a combination of a lot of different things. 10 years ago, there was a green building rating tool that was designed by the government, for the government, obviously consultant. And in that roadmap and strategy, it already pointed that it was the public sector that had to lead the way to start doing it, and then afterwards the private sector will jump in. And to tell you, I think it's a little bit of a mix of different things, because actually I'm actually a consultant for government. So I've been chosen by the EU to be the consultant to the big project green the public sector. And obviously I'm putting my little sauce into there and trying to stick the little stick into the government officials to do this. So yeah, but they're very open to it, and I think that it will happen. Yeah.
And I guess that's the power of a green building council in a country, to really influence and really push governments to be able to do that. So obviously I saw your face. How would you say net zero is getting influenced and motivated in South Africa? So how did that, what's net zero status in South Africa? And is public sector leading the way? Is private sector?
Sure. I think those were very interesting comments from Tony, because, with us, the pyramid is the other way around. The private sector is sort of leading the pack. And then especially in the net zero space, and then government is following behind. I don't want to say straddling behind, but, there's a concerted effort, especially now, with the Presidential Climate Commission and the various premiers selecting. We're fortunate enough as GBCSA, I was selected to sit on the Gauteng Premier's Expert Advisory Committee on Climate Change. So net zero is part of the priorities that we're trying to focus on, as part of that. So, government is making those changes. It's just moving slowly, but it's starting, of course, from a policy front, right? So we are seeing those changes. And as you rightfully mentioned, it's very important to think of that energy mix, because unlike the rest of Africa, South Africa, we're contributing about 80% of our energy mix comes from coal. So we are the worst polluter in the continent. And so thus we need to make much greater efforts towards the race to zero or advancing net zero. And, there has been a lot of work that we've done as a country, especially as a GBC, because we also have, we certify net zero projects as well. So we've had a few number of net zero projects that we've had, here in South Africa. So far, we've had 5, so it's not a bad number. The number will continue to grow, and a large chunk of those. So now going back to the energy mix part, because we're largely a coal industry, a large chunk of those were net zero carbon. But unlike other GBCs, we also went a step further, not just focusing on carbon, but we also have net zero ecology, net zero waste, and net zero water. Which is great, so that at least we can target it from all angles, not just looking at energy only in isolation, in just focusing on energy efficiency, but also looking at water efficiency and, of course, fauna and flora from the effects of greenfields developments from an ecology space, and waste. Waste is very, very important, because largely as South Africa, a large chunk of our waste goes into landfill, and we're running out of space. And so, we need revolutionary tactics on how do we deal with this waste? Will it become, biogas? Will it feed into our systems? And, will we do that transition? So that's where we are as a country with net zero. But moreover than that, I think largely some of the challenges, especially from a public sector perspective, has been government awareness, because the more I engage with government, the more I see that, a number of departments or cities are not aware of the movements. With cities, it's getting better, especially with the larger metropoles. But with government departments, as a result of their various portfolios that they focus on, they're not really aware of that. So that's one of the challenges. And sometimes it's also political support and political will. And that comes from understanding as well. So I think we really need to, try and break the walls and the silos, because there's a lot of silo planning and silo work, especially in the government space, where you find environment is doing the same thing as the energy sector, yet they're not talking to each other, and their policies are saying almost the same thing towards the same goal, but you just like, but why are we not collaborating, guys? So I think it's also up to us, to try and bridge these gaps, to try and coordinate, align, and assist or facilitate in this journey. I think another one is also the lack of capacity, and lack of capacity, from a knowledge perspective, and the lack of capacity from a human capital point of view within government itself to implement the work, because it's one thing training government departments to do EPCs, for example, but who is going to do that work once you have done your fair share of imparting the knowledge for them on how to do these audits? But who's going to do the work when it goes back to the ordinary day jobs of, well, our focus is in IDP and how do we build houses for people? But I mean, if, it goes back to the ordinary type of planning, design, the typical disaster risk management that is done in the municipal level. And lastly, I think the most important one, without taking too much time, is low investment with small speed of action, because as a lack of support, that's where we result in. And now if we have low investment towards net zero as an example, especially from a public sector perspective, we will not meet our ambitious goals of 2030, and ultimately it is the communities in, the peripheral areas outside the rural urban continuum that will suffer the most. Fortunately, our bigger metropoles that have the financial muscle and have the investments and have the capacity to withstand, mitigate, or adapt will be able to adapt, but some communities won't be able to even recover. They'll have to just move from that area and move to the next nearest town where they can sort of start afresh, and and that'll put a lot of exacerbated pressure on the infrastructure, on the economy of these other towns where people will then have to relocate themselves to, and it will also cause a crisis for government, let alone the private sector as well. So that's where we are as a country to the race to zero. But no, it's not all doom and gloom, because there's a lot of work that we've been doing, especially from advocacy approaches, as the GBCS say. We've been working hand in hand with governments from the national to provincial to local level. And I mean, we're working now to a point that we're also trying to reach all those municipalities that are on the urban edge, the municipalities that, are largely not focused on as a result of lack of budget or lack of capacity. Because I think it's very important that we bring everybody on board, at least from a technical know-how or knowledge share know-how, so that at least everybody is able to implement their daily jobs, incorporating the right tools and the right techniques in order to meet these targets that we need to meet. So we're doing that, and we're seeing it from a policy front, from bylaws. I mean, with the work that we've been doing with like C40 cities, the green building policies, the green building bylaws. Moreover than that, I mean, it's also leveling the playing field. Very important that we get cities to a point, and municipalities, where they have green procurement policies, because that sets the trend in the type of materials that are being sourced, or the businesses that are being supported at a local level. So that changes the whole outlook. Of course, it will cause a little rift, because all government departments or cities or municipality have their own procurement processes. But bringing this change is necessary, because that change starts at the bottom and it works its way up to the top. And we're also starting to see, I think City of Tshwane, being Pretoria, is the first they're currently working on a draft net zero bylaw and a net zero policy. So that's something to look out for. We haven't been engaged on once the draft has been drafted up, to comment on or to participate on that. There's also work that's been happening because they've joined the alliance of the C40 cities. So Ekurhuleni is the new one that has joined. Ekurhuleni, for some of you, is where OR Tambo Airport is. So that's our largest municipality in Gauteng by land mass, not necessarily economics, but by land mass. So it's very important, because there was a lot of plans for a smart city model there, especially from a mobility point of view. So, we want to see what sort of transport is going to be implemented there, to talk to at least to that element of the amount of emissions that are going to be transmitted from that sector, what sort of energy mix is going to be implemented there. Gauteng was in a meeting with the Premier this morning, and they're looking at having 5 independent power producers in special economic zones around Gauteng. So that's something to look forward to, and they're trying to implement this by the year 2023. We don't have a lot of time. This is also another means to try to take the pressure off Eskom. So Eskom is one of our energy producers in South Africa, and I think every South African can tell you that the last couple of years haven't been so rosy with that. So so that's more or less where we are, and the work that we're trying to do, and playing more and more, each time we engage with governments. Largely private sector, it's a bit different. You just have a meeting, it's adopted, we move forward. The private sector in South Africa is very, very quick to adopt. There's a lot of support towards net zero, a lot of support towards energy efficiency. My last point is on energy efficiency. We've just had a policy, it's regulated now, that we're focusing on energy efficiency, especially from an energy performance certificates point of view, that private buildings bigger than 2,000 square meters need to portray their energy certificates, and then from a public perspective, it's buildings bigger than 1,000 square meters, and then the technicalities go on from there. So there's this huge push towards educating on energy performance certificates, and we're part and parcel of that journey. We're working with Sanedi. We're working in terms of educating on that and assisting on that, so that these independent inspector bodies that will be actually carrying out these audits are fully equipped to do the job, because we won't be doing the job, we're just helping with the training. And what this is going to do, of course, now it's going to help us in creating these green industries, because I believe that the EPCs are just another step towards the green economy, the green job, the green industries, because every 3 to 5 years that license lapse, and then you have to do another energy audit again. So, you know, this is another way of targeting our high unemployment rates in South Africa, and it's Youth Month, and a lot of our youth is unemployed, and they're highly skilled because they all went to university and they're studying and they want to be part of this market. And there's a huge push from the young people to move towards, you know, climate change, sustainability in whatever sectors that they practice in. So this move by government of supporting energy efficiency through energy performance certificates is really, really an enabling environment for these green industries, these green jobs that will feed into lower level, by lower level, I mean municipalities in their built environment performance plans, sector jobs resilience plans, and that will ultimately feed, of course, into the circular economy, you know. So it's really, really great to see a lot of the work that's happening. A lot more still needs to be done, of course. But yeah, that's where we are as a country regarding that.
Man, that's so full. Like it's quite a lot that's been happening, as you said. And, you know, congratulations to South Africa when you said 5 net zero buildings. That's no small thing at all, especially when you're looking at a country and it's net zero carbon buildings for the 5 projects. Is that correct?
Yes, it's 5 net zero carbon. Yeah.
So that's no small thing at all, especially looking at our carbon factor in South Africa. You know, to be able to get net zero carbon, these are the kind of examples that we can really showcase a bit more. And I know this is one of the first conversations that we'll really be having around this in this format with sub-regional, but I can't wait until we really expand on this a little bit more, to be able to learn from these projects and how they managed to do it. I took a whole lot of notes from what you were saying, which I'll kind of transfer over to Tony, which you're talking about awareness, talking about political buy-in, the capacity building that would need to come in order to be able to really advance net zero in some of the countries. And I think, and even talking about how it's getting the cities buy-in, but knowing that it's a journey. So you mentioned quite a lot around policy. And I think that kind of leads into, you know, Tony, you started the question to say government has been the one really driving it. And if we kind of look at a city scale perspective, we normally talk about net zero at a building scale. And if we look at the East Africa group just before, they were like, if we go building by building by building, it's going to take a long time. How do we scale? I think that's almost the sentiment we're having here is we're going to be building more cities in Africa. How do we scale net zero at a city scale? So I don't know, just from your, you know, some of the work that you've been doing as well in Mauritius as part of the GBC Mauritius, what are some of that, like what are some of the things that you've seen from that perspective?
Yeah, I think first, maybe it was, to say that the public sector is leading it. I think they themselves don't know if they're going to be leading it. So yeah, it's coming, and I think they will step up to that. What we've seen, Mauritius, it's not like in South Africa. You have, you know, different municipalities, but if you look at it, you know, Mauritius itself can be one city because it's so small. You know, we have different municipalities, but you do have these what we call the smart cities. There were some like smart city schemes that have been done. So you have actually private sector who has started converting agricultural land into more profitable, or how do you say that? Viabilize, make it, yeah, you can build on it. So we take agricultural land and then we're able to convert it to developments. And that's what we've been doing in terms of what we call smart city schemes. We get lots of fiscal incentives, etc. And yeah. So in these smart cities, if you want to look at it that way, what most of them also do, they also get a license to produce energy. So because when you look at large scale producer, or this is more medium scale, it's quite attractive also to have this type of scheme compared to small scale producers. And what I've seen, that they actually don't do it in the same area. So obviously they send it back to the grid, but there have been quite a few of these contracts or these successful application done with the Central Electricity Board. But to put you in sort of what's happening here in Mauritius is we're moving towards renewable energy. I think we're about 25% now. 2030 is going to be 60%. That's what the target is. and we're phasing out coal by 2030. So basically 2030, we are hoping to have like a greener grid. And I've seen the roadmap to do that. I've seen new biomass framework also, but we put together to actually phase out coal. So which is quite an important agenda for government, and is also part of the NDC. And that other part is the 60% renewable energy in our grid. Obviously, that needs to couple with batteries, etc. Now I've seen that we're experimenting with floating PVs on our dams. So it's quite optimistic, I must say. But a lot of the projects in smart cities also, two of them are certified. One is lead neighborhood development, and the other one is BREEAM communities. So already the one for lead neighborhood development is a bit more developed in smart cities. So all the buildings where they're required to be LEED certified also, and obviously they need to be more energy efficient, etc. So I think, there's this, what I've seen more about for property developers, some of them do it, as you know, a lot of people also do it because it's a marketing thing and it's a reputation thing. Obviously, some directors, some boards, they really believe in it, but when you hit the financial, commercial, chief financial officer, then it all crumbles down to below the line. But good thing that there are these green building certification, but actually are actually driving this, because a lot of the developers get into green building, get into looking at energy efficiency, etc., because we're forced. We want to build the building in this sort of smart city, which is amazing, and unfortunately, a lot of I've seen a couple of examples of people say, hey, I just want to just get me the certification. I don't care what you do there, but we just want to get the minimum so we can do it. Which is unfortunate, but actually it's better than nothing. To pull some of these actors because you're forced by by the development to do that. So I'm not sure if I answered your questions.
No,
I've been around and around, but
No, you definitely did. And I feel like, being fortunate to have been in the session before and in this session now, I keep getting a lot of like good quotes in general from some of you in terms of, better than nothing. And also in the session before, there was a lot of us saying that it's possible in Africa. We just need to start. We just need to change the way that we're designing our buildings and our cities and our communities, because even obviously you spoke about rural communities, peri-urban communities. Sometimes, I think in the session before, there was a comment about sustainable built environments for everyone, everywhere. So this means the rural communities, the peri-urban communities, urban areas. And for Africa, our dynamic is so vast. So I think you completely answered the question. And as I said, I feel like this is one of the first of many chats around what net zero looks like sub-regionally. And I think, because we actually almost out of time and we are going to open if anyone has got any questions. So hi to everyone who is part of this. I see quite a lot of people who are from Southern Africa as well. So it's great to see you. And I think maybe Tony and until we see, because we're kind of going to go to just some last thoughts around this. If you look at Southern Africa, we are hit by quite a lot of climate disasters. Natural disasters. Just recently, KwaZulu-Natal had floods that completely, devastated the city. If you look at some of the island states and also just in the Indian Ocean, there's quite a lot. Like we are experiencing why net zero matters. And so maybe just to kind of get from your perspectives, how does one rebuild with net zero in mind, especially after some of the climate disasters and natural disasters that we've been facing in the Indian Ocean? And what are some of the things that you've been seeing? I mean, so I'll start with you, Tony, and then go to Mtobisi before we go to any questions. So if anyone has questions, please put them in the chat, and then we'll go to closing remarks. So Tony.
Yeah, I think it's getting, here it's, we've got a climate change act since 2020. Obviously, we're more vulnerable than other countries because we're small island development states. We've got like a coast, and we're very vulnerable. So it's quite high on the agenda to treat like climate adaptation mitigation very seriously. I've seen that. And now coupled with that, there's also lots of finance schemes that's coming into the country to be able to do some of these projects. And I think also in a way it's a blessing in disguise, but the cost of energy is like shooting up. For either like cars or even a household, etc. So soon we'll be be forced to look at that, because before, I remember in the old days we always like switch off the light and everything, which is more because we were worried about how much money we pay every month. And over the years, I've seen that people don't care about that, because the electricity bill is not so much because people became richer and etc. And they don't really care so much until. Before you did it because of money, now people are doing it's more about environmental, but now it's going to start also going to be because of money. And obviously it was the lowest hanging fruit all the time when we do like pitches to developers, etc. If you increase your bottom line, if you save energy, and that's been the case. And now it's going to be stronger, I think. And also the race for climate action is accelerating very, very, very rapidly. And I think we'll see lots of changes in the next couple of years.
Yeah. And maybe just before I go to Ntobisi, just from your perspective, in Mauritius, have you seen a push in terms of in any reconstruction that needs to happen after natural disasters or something along that lines? Have you seen a push towards that reconstruction being net zero or low carbon, or are there so many competing priorities? What's your observation on the ground in Mauritius?
Yeah, it's me, right? Because to Mauritius. Apologies to Ntobisi, so I was a bit confused. So I think what I've seen is there's obviously lots more money and lots more effort into adaptation than mitigation. So, take that as a benchmark. If I look at the green finance that we have here, if you do adaptation projects, then you get 15% cash back. If you do mitigation project, you get 5% cash back. So there's lots of focus on mitigation, and there are quite a few projects. And I think that what they always look at also. Recently, we had a round of project ideas also for climate adaptation mitigation. There were about 35 national projects. So so there are quite lots of thinking around this in our country at the moment.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So we see from your side, especially with what's happening on the east coast of South Africa as a coastal country.
Thanks, Vera. I think to just start off and to close off, I don't want to sound philosophical, but nature has been talking, we just haven't been listening. And, the disasters that have been happening on the east coast of South Africa, are not a new phenomenon. It's been happening as far back as I can think, the early 2000s. There was a time where the, coastal erosion that was so bad that all the beachfront restaurants, were covered with beach sand, and all that infrastructure got destroyed. The theme park got destroyed. And that was probably the first time I realized that clearly climate change is real. And this, I don't even remember what year it was, but this is way before 2008, way before, maybe 2004, 3 or 2, somewhere there. So it started then, and it slowly happened over the years. And all along, cities, especially that coastal belt, was looking at it as coastal erosion, sea level rising, disaster risk management. We'll just add that to our spatial policies, and that's as far as it goes. But now we're at a level where we can't ignore it anymore. And we're at a point where I think collaboration is the right step forward as GBCs in Africa, especially if we're talking in the southern part, collaborating with governments and the private sectors, striking those partnerships is very, very important for us to move forward. And I think moreover than that, it is supporting one another in this journey, because a large chunk of the work that we do as GBCSA is not capital driven. It's assisting, and if I can mention one project as part of this example that I'm mentioning, I've been working with Mpumalanga province governments For some of you, that's where the Kruger National Park is, that region going that side. And I've been helping them with their climate change strategy for the last 2 years. Finally, there's green building principles that have been added there because, you know, I fought for that piece to be added, and I physically wrote that, and it'll be promulgated and gazetted very, very soon, which will then feed into the most important thing that I want to get to. Tony mentioned the integration of sustainability, adaptation, mitigation is very important. But for us here in South Africa, especially from a municipal point of view, it's very important that these are factored into our IDPs, integrated development plans, because that's the super plan of a municipality, and that's how a municipality goes. Oh, we've got 500 million for roads. Oh, we've got 200 million for houses. And if that IDP budget says absolutely nothing about climate change, or it says absolutely nothing about the just transition, then we're back to square one again. So it's very important that the budgeting of a municipality prioritizes climate change through sustainability, through mitigation plans, not just having plans, but aligning that to proper budgets and aligning the various departments in the city, how they can all talk to sustainability so that we cut down the silo approach of working. And I mean, moreover than that, Tony also mentioned climate funds. There's a lot of climate funds right now. The green bonds are really taking shape in South Africa, sustainable finance, and we can tap into these various finance mechanisms if we are to embark on this journey. So for me, it's just that it's important that we just support each other along this journey, because if we really look at South Africa, for example, we launched net zero in 2017. We've done 5 projects, net zero carbon, 1 net positive ecology, which was also net zero carbon. But moreover than that, we've got a clock that's ticking against us, right? We still have the 2030 mark. And if we're counting 5 net zero carbon buildings and it's 2022 and we have 8 years to go, in that 8 years, I can from now probably say out of the 8 metropolitan municipalities, maybe let's say 6 of them will really join the party by 2030 with the work that's been done so far. Of course, maybe other work will happen because, you know, I reach out to various municipalities and try to offer aid and assistance, at least from a policy point of view, to help them get there, you know, in whatever way we can assist as the GBCSA. So, but there's still another 252 odd municipalities that, you know, still need that assistance as well. So it's very, very important for us, especially because we're going to run out of coal as South Africa. Whether, you know, people want to talk about this or they don't want to talk about this. And net zero is very, very important for us to not just go net zero carbon on buildings as well, but to tap into, you know, renewable energy options, because it's very important for us to do that transition for future generations, and also to open these green industries and to grow the economy as a whole, and stop emitting as much as we were emitting. So I think that for me are really my closing remarks. And I think I know
you really jumped to closing remarks before I got to the questions. But I think what I probably wanted to note, and you know, this is quite, it's encouraging, and there's opportunity, and we know that everyone who's in this room gets it. You know, we get why this is important. That's why we're here. And I think that, I hope that it's encouraging to everyone who is watching to really like get in contact with your local Green Building Council, wherever in the world you are, to see how you can really support with the advocacy that the Green Building Council is doing there. Because what's quite interesting is for Southern Africa, we do have quite a high carbon factor. For a lot of the countries in this region, in East Africa, they use a lot of hydropower, which is helpful from a carbon perspective. But for Southern Africa, we do need to be mindful of that. So I'll go to one question, and I know this is probably a bad idea because I need at least 5 minutes before we do the transition to the next. So if everyone can please be quick with the answer. But this question is from Baruch Jeremy, and his question, and I think I'll target that to you, Mthobisi, and maybe we'll dovetail that immediately with closing remarks. You have said closing remarks, but maybe if you could answer that question, and then Tony, you can do closing remarks from your side. So Mthobisi, the question is it fair to expect emerging economies to reach net zero on the same schedule as long industrialized ones? It's quite interesting.
Sure. I love that question, firstly, because I was at the City Power event, the Energy Indaba, I think last week. And I was asked that question as well. So I think, honestly speaking, right, that question also comes with another part to it, that, while we don't pollute as much as Europe and this and that and this and that, right? But unfortunately, if we don't try and meet the deadline with the rest of the other more industrialized economies, we'll be left at the tail end. And unfortunately, we are going to suffer more. The examples of Durban are just a teardrop in the ocean with what will happen. Because firstly, we don't have the amount of money that the rest of Europe has. We don't have the capacity that the rest of Europe has in whatever bracket you're looking at what capacity is. And so if we don't try and assist one another into meeting these targets, we may not meet them perfectly or aligned, but we need to move. We need to move from the start line to get somewhere, even if you don't get to 100% of your buildings net zero carbon by 2050, at least get to the 50% mark. We need to start somewhere, and it starts with small initiatives like net zero, energy efficiency, water efficiency, decarbonizing the economy, moving from, supporting private cars to supporting sustainable public infrastructure and public transport, re-looking at how we build. Materials is very, very important. Materials matter, because when you talk net zero as well, you want to be building buildings that have the right type of materials. There's a large talk, especially if I'm talking Namibia, Botswana, and South Africa. There's a huge focus on mass timber, a huge focus on the promotion of timber in the construction sector. University of Pretoria, their new library is a mass timber structure. It's something that we are proud of. And so we want to move away from, I will call it, bricks and mortar is primitive for me. I think timber is more futuristic. It has better insulation, it emits less carbons and so on and so forth. So we really need to make that shift in our thinking as well, because, I know in South Africa, when you talk timber, people just think you're going back to the Stone Age. And I've been in meetings where people are like, but why timber? That's outdated. Nobody wants, but we need to understand these things. If you look at the States, a lot of the coastal houses are built from timber. And there's a reason why for that, because a lot of the issues with weather, is it cyclones, So we have to put that into grasp that perhaps we need to relook at our building model of the future, that perhaps some of these houses, we integrate this and emit less carbon. So from my stance, yes, it may not be fair, but unfortunately, now we're not looking at what's fair and what's not fair. We're looking at all our lives matter, and we all need to be there for this future. And, we can't mess up the planet. And so that for those that come after us, especially for South Africa, right? We're talking 1.5 degrees Celsius that we're trying to limit to by the year 2050. And so if we don't do that for South Africa, then let's say it increases globally by 2 degrees if we don't meet our commitments. For South Africa specifically, it'll be 4 degrees Celsius because of our geographical positioning. And if we hit that 4 degrees by the year 2100, the global surface temperature increase will be 4 degrees. And for South Africa, it'll be 8 degrees. Now for South Africans, if I talk Limpopo and I talk Northern Cape and I talk Northwest, everybody knows how blistering hot those regions are. And of course, I'm not leaving the east coast of South Africa alone. Durban has flash floods. We've seen what's happening. The temperatures during summer are blistering hot, and they never have winter in that part of the country. It's always just humid and warm. So can we imagine what will happen when our temperatures increase to that time? And I mean, yes, none of us will be alive to see it, but let us be a bit more sustainable in our approaches, in our thinking, in our planning and design, so that at least we have something better to present to our future generations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And why would the discussion start like this at 5 to the next session? Because now there's a comment in the chat. So before I go to the closing remarks from you, Tony, I think there's a comment here to say that as a continent, we should have our own targets that must specify which emission sources and which gases are covered. Okay, that whole conversation, next time we have something like this, which I think we probably need to do as an Africa Regional Network, then we can really sit around the table and understand like our positioning when it comes to something like this. And then a comment from Trudy from Uganda, from Green Building Council Uganda, to say wonderful in-depth conversation. Thanks to the panelists. Thank you, and obviously Tony. Thank you for that. And then we've got from Sarah from Egypt, who says towards a net zero mindset, performance analysis, and net zero scenario simulations. And then I've had Emmanuel's hand who's been up the whole time. Emmanuel is from Green Building Council Nigeria, and he's on the next panel. So I feel like I might let you chat about your question on your next panel, Emmanuel, because I lowered his hand and he put it right back up. So I think we'll move on to that. So Tony, I think let's close off with your closing remarks. So the question is, and this is, I think, the challenge to Southern Africa, because of our carbon factor and our electricity source, because of our commitments towards net zero carbon, not only operational carbon, but embodied carbon as a region. You know, there's the challenge, but there's opportunities. There are things of changing mindsets, like going back to mass timber. You know, that's something that, you know, there's quite a lot that we can do. The question is it fair to expect emerging economies to reach net zero on the same schedule as long industrialized ones? And just your closing remark on why net zero in Southern Africa.
Yeah, thanks, Vera. I think for me, why we should also go as fast as the industrialized countries. I think we should need everyone to do our best. It's so critical at the moment. I mean, lots of people say to me, why are you bother doing all the things you're doing? You won't even change like 1% of whatever, if the world would stay, you go, you die, it would be the same. So you won't have it like very impactful. But my belief is that, in my lifetime, I just want to do the most I can. And I think in each country, I know there's this whole debate, why us, etc. But we should do all our best, because without that, I don't think we'll be able to reach the targets. And then every cent counts, like some accountant will say. And closing remark, I think for us, like SIDS, we import a lot of different things. And now we're looking at different construction techniques. Already it's fun because it's quite boring construction if it's the same thing all the time. I think it's quite fun to look at new innovative way of constructing. We're also looking at biosourced materials at the moment in Mauritius, so that also create sort of economic opportunities. And then as freight's going more expensive, petrol, etc., to be more self-sufficient, I think it's quite important for us to focus on that also in terms of net zero carbon, to be less dependent and to look also internally, because obviously transport adds to the carbon emission. I think it's good for us to be looking at all of these different components and to drill down to what we actually consuming, putting in our buildings, how we're doing things, and actually being conscious. And I think being conscious for a whole country, nation, world is very important.
Oh, thank you. I feel like we could have this. It's almost like a fireside chat, because I know the time that it is for us. It's 7 o'clock in South Africa. Tony, I think it's 9 o'clock on your side in Mauritius. So it almost feels like a nice fireside chat, which is awesome. And thank you to every single one of you for your contribution. I think you've given all of us in this room so much to think about, specifically around the Southern African context and also for the continent. And just what is happening in the Southern African region with some of the natural disasters, and just doing better than we previously would have. And even the last session, you spoke about how we're learning this earth from future generations. We're learning it from our children. We're not inheriting it from our ancestors. We're learning it from our children. And I feel like this is the same sentiment that's been going across the room and within the Africa sessions, which is really good. So thank you very much, Tony, Mtobisi. Please have a good evening. For everyone else, we will be transitioning to West and Central Africa. So we'll take a few minutes just to get all of those panelists on the platform. Man, we could talk forever. Thank you all. See you all soon. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
All the best.